is an exaggeration. Now, I've been a writer for 20 years, and an ass for 55. It's been said there are two men in the world who are most remarkable. Kipling is one, and now I'm the other.
The first words I spoke in the original phonograph, a little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb, its feet were white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Before my mother became enamored with Florida, she had long been acknowledged as the fashionable Queen of Chicago, noted for her beauty, her wit, her fabulous pearls and diamonds, and the enormous Gothic Palmer Castle. Of her jewels, Father would say, "There she stands with $200,000 just around her neck." Mother often claimed, "The more you put on, the worse you look. The more you take off, the better you look." I can assure you she did not follow her own advice. But I soon came to realize Mother was more than that. All those elegant balls she threw were for charity, the proceeds going for her many causes. Our home was often filled with the voices of working girls, there for meetings and lectures. A few silver spoons were reported missing, but Mother didn't mind. She was that rare breed of woman born that married wealth, who chose to use her influence and empower women less fortunate as an advocate for their education and improved working conditions. An extraordinary undertaking for the 19th century.
I was not a suffragist. I simply felt that intelligent women could work with men to achieve their goals. I preferred diplomacy to balance the social and working worlds. Both my father and my husband had encouraged me to learn about business. I helped organize the Chicago Women's Business Club in 1888 to help women entering the workforce, and served as vice president to the Civil Federation to bring capital and labor together. And oh my, what a time I had in 1892 with Chicago's first World's Fair. We won the bid to host the World Columbian Exhibition to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in America. And as head of the board of lady managers, I traveled abroad, meeting with many heads of state to present the works of talented women. Well, you can imagine, life was a whirlwind of ball gowns and grand soirees. But I also felt that culture and society itself was a business and not a frivolity. When my dear Potter passed away in 1902, I was only 53. Potter Jr. just 20 and Honoré a year older. I took the boys off to England, where they often dined with royalty, and they loved all the boat travel. But after a time, I was ready to come home. I was, after all, a businesswoman, anxious to explore new opportunities, and perhaps simplify my life a bit.
Paradise at last, paradise at last. Potter would have loved it, the beauty's unsurpassed in lovely Florida. Paradise at last, skies are of the brightest blue and rarely overcast.
Panthers are prowling in bushes, snakes are hanging from trees, and at night mosquitoes bite, so do ants and fleas. Ouch! Oh, paradise? You must be joking.
Paradise at last, paradise at last. I predict the south of France will one day be outclassed by lovely Florida. Paradise at last. Here I'll build a model farm that will not be surpassed.
A farm?
A farm. A model farm. I'll grow oranges and ship them off in freighters. I'll grow celery and peppers and tomatoes. I'll raise cattle, pigs and poultry too. To stick my fingers in the soil seems so right to do. Oh, paradise at last, paradise at last.
Can't we make her change her mind and think about it later?
Lovely Florida, paradise at last.
Good grief, she's going to move us down to live among the gators.
The water's always sparkling, the sun shines every day. It's quite the perfect paradise for grandchildren to play.
They'll learn to chew tobacco, they'll learn to hunt and poach, and when they ride they'll saddle up a big palmetto roach.
Lovely Florida, paradise at last.
You don't suppose she'll settle in this godforsaken region?
Lovely Florida, paradise at last.
I feel I've just been drafted in the Foreign Legion. Florida is not the place to be.
Florida is just a place for me.
What prompted my mother's astounding decision to venture into an unknown jungle wilderness? It might have been the brutal Chicago winters. But she could have lived anywhere in the world, and often did. In England, she even took me with her on the maiden voyage of the RMS Lusitania in 1907. My brother and I had a hard time keeping up with her constant traveling, wrapped in jewels and yards of Paris finery. Rumors abounded that Mother would marry a royal title, the Prince of Monaco, the King of Serbia, this earl or that duke. But it was not to be. Back home at her own castle, Mother happened to read an advertisement in the Chicago Tribune for raw land opportunities in sun-kissed Sarasota. She was ready to put her business acumen back to work and build a winter haven for her fellow Chicagoans. In that respect, I suppose she could be considered a true visionary, because, Lord, they followed her in droves.
When I first arrived in Sarasota, I was immediately enchanted. The weather was too lovely. Here at last was heaven. It quite reminded me of the Bay of Naples. I was taken with the quaintness of the local community, the fishermen and farmers. The hardness of these frontiersmen reminded me of my late husband Potter, who was from a Quaker farming family in New York and had come to Chicago in the 1850s, when it was but a wild prairie town. My own family had arrived at about the same time from Kentucky, and I was brought up as an overeducated Southern belle. Business and politics were part of my life. My father had always discussed his real estate development ideas with me. I met Potter, his business associate, at dinner when I was 13, and I expected I was a bit precocious. By the time I made my debut at 21, the dashing Mr. Potter Palmer came to court me. My dear, he was the most eligible bachelor in Chicago, though older than me by 23 years. Still, he cut quite a figure, and his persistence eventually won me over.
Father told me that he had been so taken with Mother that he had decided to patiently wait until she was of the age to marry. By then, he had become Chicago's biggest landowner, and in 1870, when they married, Father built her the Palmer House, the grandest hotel in Chicago. Rudyard Kipling called it a gilded, mirrored rabbit warren crammed with barbarians. I suppose he was thrilled that it burned to the ground a year later in the Great Fire. My father lost everything. Undaunted, he secured a loan and rebuilt the hotel, fireproof this time, and he went on to develop the barren swampland around Lake Michigan. They nicknamed it Frog Pond. Everyone called it Frog's Folly.
Well, we had the last laugh, didn't we? When Potter Sr. built me my beautiful castle there, doctors claimed the location was unhealthy, the winds off the water dangerous, so we were somewhat isolated for a while. But Potter was prescient. The social world eventually migrated north to make Lakeshore Drive the fabled Gold Coast. Still, Potter Jr. has a point. The winter months can be bone-chilling. One frigid day in January, when that little advertisement for a citrus grove caught my eye, I decided to investigate. I brought along my father, brother, and of course the boys, who loved an adventure.
Most of Mother's friends thought she had lost her mind. We already had such magnificent, well-appointed homes in Chicago, Newport, Bar Harbor, London, and Paris, filled with antiques and fine art. Now we were heading off into an unknown and possibly dangerous territory. But there was no taking her out of it. In total, Mother's buying spree netted her roughly 1/3 of Sarasota County. I wonder what Father would have thought of all this. Well, he had advised her to invest in real estate, but I doubt this is what he had in mind. Father had been gone for 8 years by that time, and, against the petitions of his lawyers, gave Mother his entire estate. "Your wife is a young woman," they cautioned. "She may well marry again." Father coolly replied, "If she does, he'll need the money." But as much as Mother loved beautiful, costly things, she was also a committed conservationist, On her own winter estate, the Oaks in Osprey, she designed the most beautiful gardens and parks on those 350 acres, yet preserved the pioneer dwellings and prehistoric Indian remains. She devoted 15,000 acres to ranching on the Myakka River and introduced important innovations to the citrus and farming industry, bringing in Midwestern technology like vats to dip the cattle for ticks. She brought in Brahma bulls to breed with the scrawny creatures that roamed Florida back then. I can still picture her trudging around the muck of meadowsweet pastures in her simple farm dresses and boots, tending to the cattle and pigs, gardening, taking the grandchildren for picnics. But in the evening, you know she'd bring out the Paris gowns for dinner.
Well, one has to observe the niceties of life. Even at the cottage, I was surrounded by my favorite paintings. My Monets, Renoirs, Degas, whose favorite subjects dealt with dancers and brothels. But my dear, so exquisitely rendered. Oh, and of course, my friend Mary Cassatt, an American woman of exceptional talent who lived in Paris, because women did not have to fight for recognition there. I did cut down on the amount of jewelry I wore, although I still treasure my cameo brooches, as one does. I was in my 60s now, and my priorities had changed. I choose family, not social acquaintances, to fill my days, and was well rewarded. I have much I wish to teach my grandchildren, and one becomes aware of one's mortality.
Mother passed away only 8 years after she'd arrived in Sarasota. Her vast ranch land holdings along the river became Myakka State Park. Her treasured Osprey Point, later called Historic Spanish Point, with its gardens and fountains where we splashed when we were kids in the heat of the day, its lush jungles and charming beach cottages, it was all preserved as a popular tourist attraction. In the 16 years since my father's death, Mother had single-handedly doubled the estate he'd left her. And in those 8 years of living in Florida, she molded her beloved Sarasota into an affluent, sought-after winter destination. And at the same time, she developed the ranching, the farming, and the dairy industries. Mother brought her own unique vision to paradise. And the Palmer family names on the streets and neighborhoods are a testament to her well-deserved title, the Queen of Sarasota.
Oh, gracious, now you are embarrassing me, son. I will say that I have found my one talent, if I have any, at Sarasota Bay. It is beautiful to watch things grow and see flowers bloom as you plant them. And thank you, dear, for helping me to create an aqueduct and my waterfall of seashells. I expect you were not quite thrilled at first with neither fresh water nor electricity. Goodness, nothing but swampy wilderness. But like your father found on the shores of Lake Michigan. But why were we here after all if not for that? This is paradise. The bay, the sunsets, the fish jumping before one's eyes, the cacophony of tropical birds who seem to get along just fine with their winter visitors. We are all migratory birds of a feather, are we not? Searching for a brief resting place.